Another thing that I'm very, very excited, Vinny, is this notion of enterprise mesh. And that is something that I think generations of enterprise software vendors always thought about, but it was always very hard to do because, as I said, you had to do in code. And the idea is pretty simple. If you look at this is sort of a very simplified chart of a typical project-based organization. And that is, you can see in the center is the kind of stuff we do, right? That's, it's financials, it's projects, it's procurement, HR, and so on. But on the outside is everything else that's going on in their IT landscape. They will have a CRM system, they will have a CPQ system, they might have a specialized project management system, they might use, Teams or Slack or whatever, for collaboration. They might use, separate, business management system, financial system, planning system, or so on. And then sort of a myriad of different services to do electronic billing and collections, and VAT and treasury and credit checking and company lookups and whatever, which differ by all these different countries, all these services differ by different countries. And so when you go through the flow like this, where you realize as a customer, right, all these things need to connect, right? So your data from your CRM needs to flow into the ERP, the customer data, order data. But even more, you need to have visibility as you're staffing a project, right? And you're allocating your best, consultants onto a project, and you deal with sort of utilization. You want to see not just, how allocate to the customers, but to the prospects that are soon to become customers, right? You don't want to run out of capacity to service your prospect is going to become your customer in a couple of weeks. So you want to take into account things that, all this data across all these different systems. And so if we look at sort of a typical customer, even in the, mid-market segment that we're serving, they have, 100 to 200 or so systems, that they run, and they all need to connect. And again, what we observed in the past, or we observe every single customer I talk to, they say, okay, we have this problem, and the way we do it, we go and build some of these integrations, or vendor might have a couple of integrations out the box, a few integrations out the box. Then we have professional services or partners build some integrations. And for the rest, there is like really no integration. The integration is like, what's the world's oldest middleware? Control C, Control V. That's the middleware, right? So, you get a new customer, let's say in a smaller country that, let's say it's a North American customer, but they might have an office in Sweden or Norway and Finland or Belgium or whatever, right? And, you get a new customer, you want to do a credit check. What happens? Well, it waits for somebody. And a human then at some point, finds some time and would go to the Belgium, credit check database and look up that customer and manually enter, some status in the ERP that, this one's good to go, right? And when you multiply this out to different countries, to different kinds of services that you need to do, to all these connection points in this, 100 to 200 different applications, you end up with a lot of wasted time. So we're doing actually pretty broad research now in terms of how much sort of money is spent on sort of integrating things versus the ERP. And we're finding so far the early data is, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 10x. Companies, if they spend, for every dollar they spend in the ERP, they spend $10 in terms of people capacity to service all these sort of integrations and do a lot of this manually. Now we'll validate these numbers, as we do much broader study, but these are the first kinds of things that we see. And so this is a notion of enterprise mesh because of this, extension kit, integration kit that allows you to sort of connect things without writing any code. Where the idea is to look at these industries, one industry at a time, and pre-connect all these things together for them. So as we demo the software or as we deploy the software, we say, which CRM do you have? Which collaboration system you have? Which credit checking system do you use in this country or that country or another country? And ask them the questions, and next day, we have it for them because we've pre-integrated them all before for them. So connecting CRMs and CPQs to the financials, connecting sort of HR skills data to project staffing and reflecting it back when the project's done. Connecting all these different pieces across for planning, for utilization, for profitability, for bookings, again, as the project starts, automatically kicking off the channels and Teams or Slack and putting people there, something that most people do now, particularly in the sort of remote mode that we've been in during the pandemic, that those tools are used much, much more, extensively, but sort of a lot of creation, configuration of them needs to be done manually. And then, so connecting to the sort of this whole industry of, very, very specialized services that needs to be done. So that's the idea of the vertical specific mesh, right? We'll look at this one industry at a time. We pre-create the mesh that we could sort of drop on the set of applications they already have, and using our sort of using the extension integration kit tooling, without having to write code to do that.
I think what is the timeline for each of the industries? The mesh for each
So
industries?
I'll share this in the roadmap that's coming in a second. Generally speaking, we're going to try and do the first mesh by the end of the year, the professional service oriented mesh. Again, the tooling is there. A lot of the individual integrations we've done, extension integration kit has been out to the customers already. So customers, even with our older ERP7 software, are using extension kits. So we have a fair amount of data about how long it takes to put together each individual integration. And in a lot of these cases, it's like a day or two. The integration to your typical smaller footprint service, like a company lookup, company information lookup, or credit check type of service is about a day or two of work. So that's that. That's the vision for this. Pre-existing integrations by verticals, delivered as essentially product functionality. As I said, a lot of this is enabled, or all of this is enabled by, by the re-architecture that we've done. So as much as we talk about, okay, well, it's a cloud product and it's a multi-tenant product, as I said, it's almost a little bit of par for the course. The main benefits are actually in ability to connect these things together, in ability to do vertical stuff through this no-code tooling, to do localization through low-code tooling, to connect, create the mesh to low-code tooling. That's what this architecture enables. So now to walk you a little bit through the roadmap, and that's where, as I said, as we're just kicking off, I'm so excited. We've been staring at this chart for a long, long time, and counting days and going, towards the end. And what I'm happy to say now is we're at the end of at least the first phase. So we're delivering the product. It's, all the coding is done. We're going through a process of deploying it to all the sort of Azure location where we're going to be. But as I said, initial incarnation in, just next week, financials projects, HCM, with initial focus on US and Canada, and initial models around PSO is, right here, right now, available to our customers. In the next 3 months, there will be a little bit of a catching up to do with the procurement is sort of one of the areas, and then sort of catching up to more or less our standard footprint in terms of countries. So the APAC, Central Europe, UKI, and Nordics, as well as payrolls and so on, and additional models, public sector, nonprofit. So in the middle of the year, it's always hard to talk about sort of parity between two different products because they're different a little bit, but give or take, they're very similar in terms of functional footprint, in terms of regions, and in terms of industries between ERP7 and ERPx. Now, ERPx is built on a completely different foundation, but it, because of the way we inherited a lot of the feature function stuff from ERP7. It's very similar in terms of feature function to ERP7. And from that point on, there will be quite a bit of difference, and they would diverge in a major way. So you asked a question around the meshes. So all the, obviously the sort of tooling is there and individual examples of there. And what we're going to do is sort of go really sort of broad and try and, do an industry at a time, capture many, many systems, not like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but it could be, tens or maybe 100 systems, to pre-integrate within each individual mesh. So that's sort of really the direction. But I think the main thing, to take away is, again, the years of work now culminated in, the system that's out to customers. And so let me talk about customers for a second. So we signed before, obviously the system is not out yet, it's literally next week, but we've signed 15 customers so far. The goal was to cover major elements in terms of the industry dimension and country dimension. So we have customers, kind of representative customers, for all of these areas. So 15 customers with, customers in Central Europe, customers in UKI, in North America. We have nonprofit customers, public sector customers, PSO customers, and higher ed customers. And, the initial, yeah, go ahead.
Existing customers or new ones?
It's both. It's both. I don't remember the numbers very precisely off the cuff, but it's about, if folks on the phone have 60-40 new versus existing, right?
Yeah, it's on the slide for each region. So there's new business or migration.
Okay, yeah. Okay, there you go. Yeah. So new versus migration. So yeah. So it was, my recollection was 60-40 is maybe a little bit. Yeah, it's probably right about that.
And the new ones, Dmitri, clearly it's impressive that with a new product you were able to get new ones. What was there? Did they tell you why they chose the product?
Yeah, look, what we try to do with this is sort of combine the best of two worlds. It's very functionally rich, very industry oriented, very local, in terms of countries. There's a lot of depth in terms of countries, but they're also impressed with sort of what we've done on the platform side. And, as for a lot of these selections, in the ERP space, it's sort of a combination of, does it solve my needs right here, right now, and that sort of feature, function, localization, and stuff? And is this a platform I want to bet, on for the next 10 years? So they evaluate, sort of technology and underlying foundational stuff to make sure that, we're not going to go through this big change, very, very, very soon, because nobody wants to go through this, at large scale, right? And so sort of a combination of, the functional stuff and flexibility in industries and countries on top of this platform has been impressive to them, even though, it's a new product. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, so some of them, AmeriCares was actually technically the very first customer, we signed that, they're a nonprofit in North America, but so this is something we're very excited about. And, again, it's actually kind of cool to me that you asked a question that was always in my mind, that, before the product's out, how many customers can you sign? Because don't they want to see, don't they want to try, don't want to test it and whatnot? And, I've been very, very pleasantly surprised with this sort of willingness, to go with this. So the last little section I wanted to cover is sort of how we're thinking about migrations.
Migrations, yeah.
Yeah. So the main thing here is, remember, so let me just kind of step back for a second, is, as we thought about ERPx and one of the reasons we called it ERPx versus ERP8 was, people are kind of trained, particularly with this like phones, right? That when the number goes up, like you better start moving, right? This is not something we necessarily wanted to create or a feeling we wanted them to take away, and essentially ERPx, we forked the code line, right? So it's a parallel code line. And for the time being, we will continue investing, in both of them. So we're not trying to sort of push the customer base to sort of stop migrating very, very fast. Again, initially in terms of feature function, in industries and countries, the products are not very, very different. Over time, they will diverge. And over time, we will ask customers, to consider, ERPx. But, at the moment, we're not trying to force them. Now, having said this, obviously things change as we have this new product. So first of all, for new customers, that's our default now. As we talk to the new customers, and as we discuss their needs and the fit of what we have, for them, ERPx is sort of a default answer for us. For the existing customers, they split into sort of a few different buckets, and we're thinking about them in different buckets. So first of all, we build a set of diagnostic tools, to understand, to go into the instance and understand how they're using our product right now, what functionality they're using, what's the degree of customizations that they used, and so on. And you remember that in the past, the customizations were, sort of in the fabric of the product. So they had direct access to the database, they could run SQL, they could change things in the schema, or add additional stuff in the schema. So, which is something that's no longer, okay in the existing product, where we separate, what we do from what they do, and they have to use the extension kit, integration kit tooling, to do all this customization. So as we look at the sort of the existing customer base, and again, these numbers will sort of change and evolve a little bit, but it's sort of very representative of what we've seen so far, is that about 45% of them will be able to migrate through what we call technical migration, which is essentially, running software to take their data, to take the configuration and sound the customizations and move it from ERP7 to ERPx. So, it won't be fully automatic, but it will be, close to that, with a little bit of work on top by professional services folks to implement some of the things that are not fully movable and to sort of validate whether the transition happened, okay.
And they'll have to do integration testing and so on, right? Just to make sure.
Yeah, there's some testing, but generally speaking, a lot of that is pretty automatable. That. So about 35%, and usually that's when they've done the customizations that we cannot easily sort of migrate or, move over, is sort of what we call a journey, which is essentially the main thing they need to do is to take out the customizations and re-implement them in our standard extension integration kit tooling, right? So instead of going directly into the database, they need to re-implement those customizations, through integration and extension kit, and then they essentially become bucket number one.
Are those features, or do they have to recode it?
It's usually, well, a lot of that is, various kinds of reports or integrations with other systems. So, for some of this, they don't have to recode it. They could use sort of a low code, no code tooling, to achieve the same purpose, but they have to redo them, not recode. Recode is not always the thing they need to, but they have to redo them. Sometimes without coding. And that's about 35%. And about 20.
Or they may decide to retire some of them, right? Some of the customizations may be too old and they don't need to move them.
Yeah, that's actually another good point, is that, and we found this as we're going through our own conversion, is that, what you find is that a lot of these stuff, it's like layers and layers and layers and layers, right? Something was done at some point in the past and it's no longer needed. And, as people open the thing up, they say, okay, well, let's throw away these and let's redo these, right? And it's not always necessarily that every single thing needs to be moved, for sure. I totally agree.
In fact, in a couple of your competitors, bigger competitors, retiring customizations is often where the payback is in the move.
Yeah, that's actually right. Which brings me actually to the third bucket that has some of the same characteristics, and that's re-implementation. And usually it comes from sort of three different, reasons. Reason number one is they're on some really, one of the older versions. They didn't move, and sort of they're kind of stuck a little bit in the past, and this is an opportunity to sort of redo it. There's no easy way to sort of automatically migrate them. Reason number two is they've done something really gnarly and funky in terms of customizations. They build like a whole new application within the application kind of thing, right? And that is harder to pull out, and you have to kind of rethink that. But reason number three is what's a little bit similar to what you said, which is they say, hey, look, we're going through digital transformation. We don't want to do like a bug for bug moving old thing into the new thing. It's an opportunity for us to actually rethink, how we want to run, this kind of a system. And so instead of just doing, just moving it over, let's re-implement it, from scratch and take this opportunity to re-implement this. So we find customers in this bucket as well who just say, no, I don't want to have if I'm going to have a new system, I want to have a new system. I don't want to have, move all of the, baggage of the existing system into the sort of into the new platform.
Dmitri, the years where, you don't have as big an system integrated ecosystem, but having them automate their own implementation could be another opportunity. I mean, many of them are still throwing bodies at migrations, right? When a lot of the conversion, a lot of the testing, a lot of the integration can be automated. So this is, by the way, one of the area again, we're not necessarily, as I said, we're not necessarily creating big sense of urgency for our customers to migrate over yet. I mean, ERPx is still new. We need to work out sort of the migration, tooling and the processes to make it seamless. But over time, again, my view on this is, anything that could be automated should be automated. I mean, generally speaking, in terms of implementations and migrations, this is one of my little hobby horses that, that anything that software can do should be done in software, not with like humans running around and doing it manually. And, again, as I said, I mentioned, I spent the last 4 years at Google, and, a lot of these things around, how to do QA or how to do this notion of DevOps or SRE came from kind of the same idea, right? Humans used to do it, but if you, at some point when the scale of problems so large, you can no longer do it manually. You need to start thinking about the right software, to do what humans used to do manually, right? And over time ends up being just such a better solution, and this is something that we're working towards as well. Dmitri, I could find you a job at a couple of other vendors who desperately need to think that way.
And I think that's also another thing that, over time, what I've learned is that it just frees up resources that you can dedicate to other things.
And the results become more predictable, right? Software doesn't screw up as much as humans do. So.
Yeah, that's right. So Vinnie, that's sort of a gist of what we're doing with ERPx. The vision, the roadmap, we're right here, right now. Again, we preserve the roots of the company with regards to industry focus and country specific focus. We're adding this very different layer in terms of user experience and in terms of low code, no code ways to connect things together. We're layering this enterprise mesh idea over the top to deliver value that in the past was lost in sort of a control C, control V manual work. And then, the early success with, signing 15 customers, we're very encouraged by it. And, on the migration side, we're I think we're in the good shape in the sense that we've developed a fair amount of pretty good tooling to sort of understand who is who and what do they use and how do they use, which sometimes, that visibility was missing in the past. Now we're a lot more granular understanding this, and now we're developing tools to automate as much as we possibly can their migration, to the new system. That's generally the summary.
Dmitri, I cannot wait to talk to some of your early customers.
Yeah. I mean, soon we're in the process with this 15, we're in the process of planning the deployments, and some of them they start going live, fairly shortly.
Great. Very crisp. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank